The machine gun nest erupted. 12 elite operators hit the dirt as tracer rounds screamed overhead, carving orange lines through the darkness. Behind a crumbling wall, the team's best marksmen squeezed off 3 shots, all misses. The wind was impossible. The angles were death. Blood soaked the sand as men screamed for cover. "Vale, we need you now!" From the back of the formation, the 18-year-old nobody had been warning them about this exact ambush for the past 20 minutes. They'd laughed at her, told her to shut up, called her a kid playing soldier. Now 25 enemy fighters had them pinned in a kill zone, and the girl they mocked was their only way out alive. She settled behind her rifle, 1 breath, 1 heartbeat. Then she started dropping bodies. Before we dive in, if you want to see how this impossible mission ends, stay with me until the final shot. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Tessa's story can travel across the world. The C-130's cargo bay was a steel coffin packed with egos. Tessa Vale sat alone on the starboard bench, spine pressed against riveted metal, noise-canceling headset blocking out most of the engine roar. She was running calculations in her head. Wind speed, humidity, barometric pressure, the way desert thermals would bend a bullet's path after sunset. Her rifle case rested between her boots. Her gloves were already on. Everything else was just noise. Across from her, 12 men from an elite joint task force were doing what operators always did before a mission, talking shit. "So who's the kid?" The voice came from a brick-shaped staff sergeant named Rourke, biceps like engine blocks, neck tattooed with something tribal and regrettable. He jerked his chin toward Tessa without looking at her directly. "New sniper," someone answered. "Replacement for Hayes." "Hayes got medically retired after taking shrapnel in Kandahar," another operator added. "Dude could shoot through a keyhole at 1,000 yards. Rourke squinted across the dim red cabin light. "And they sent us that?" Tessa didn't react. She'd heard worse. She kept her eyes on the scope she was cleaning, a deliberate, methodical process she'd performed 10,000 times. Wipe the lens, check the turrets, test the parallax. Muscle memory older than most of the friendships in this aircraft. "How old is she?" someone asked. 18, said Lieutenant Carver, the unit's second in command. He was leaning against a cargo net, arms crossed, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. "Just finished her advanced course last month." 18. Rourke let the word hang in the air like rotting fruit. Then he laughed, sharp, ugly, dismissive. "Jesus Christ, Command sent us a child." A few others joined in, not loud, not cruel. Just the kind of low, rumbling mockery that lived in the space between professionals who didn't take someone seriously. The kind that said you don't belong here without needing to spell it out. Tessa clicked her scope back into place and slid it into its padded case. She said nothing. "She even been in a firefight?" another operator asked. "Does the range count?" someone joked. More laughter. Carver didn't join in, but he didn't stop it either. He just checked his watch and glanced toward the cockpit. They were 20 minutes out from the drop zone, 20 minutes from a hostage rescue deep in hostile territory, and half his team was busy underestimating the person who might save their asses. Tessa pulled a laminated map from her vest and studied it under a pocket light. The target was a militant compound outside the town of Al-Kharif, a grid of low-slung buildings and shattered walls nestled in a valley between 2 ridgelines. 3 American aid workers, 2 women, 1 man, had been captured 4 days ago. Intel said they'd be executed at dawn. The mission was simple on paper: fast insertion, hit the compound, extract the hostages, exfil before enemy reinforcements arrived. But Tessa had been reading the terrain analysis for the past 6 hours, and something didn't add up. "Lieutenant," she said quietly. Carver looked over. "Yeah?" "The ridge positions." Tessa tapped the map. "Thermal satellite shows heat signatures here, here, and here. Official count says 12 to 15 militants inside the compound, but if you add the ridge spotters, we're looking at closer to 30. Carver frowned. "Intel says 15. "Intel's wrong." A few heads turned. Rourke snorted. "Oh, she's got opinions now," he muttered. Tessa kept her voice level. "I'm just saying what's in the imagery. If they've got overwatch positions on both ridges, we'll be walking into a crossfire the second we breach the perimeter." "Imagery analysis isn't your job, kid," Rourke shot back. "Your job is to sit still and take the shots we tell you to take." "My job," Tessa said calmly, "is to keep people alive." Rourke's grin faded. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You know what my job is? It's making sure boots like you don't get the rest of us killed because they think they're smarter than the entire intelligence apparatus. I didn't say I was smarter. I said the numbers don't match. Then maybe you can't count. Tessa met his eyes. No anger, no fear, just cold, unblinking certainty. I can count just fine. And if you walk into that compound thinking there's only 15 hostiles, you're going to find out the hard way that there's a lot more. The bay went quiet. Carver rubbed his jaw. He didn't like conflict inside his team, especially not before a mission, but he also didn't like intel discrepancies. Vale, you're saying there could be twice as many fighters as briefed? At least. Based on what? Some heat blobs on a satellite pass? Based on pattern recognition. Militants don't put solo sentries on ridge lines. They put teams. 2 per position, minimum. Thermal camouflage makes them harder to count, but the spacing is consistent. If you overlay the last 3 passes, you can see the rotation schedules. One of the other snipers, a wiry Texan named Hatch, leaned over to look at her map. He studied it for a moment, then whistled low. Shit, she might be right. Rourke rolled his eyes. Oh, come on. No, seriously, Hatch pointed. Look at the intervals. She's right about the spacing. That's not random. That's a defensive perimeter. Carver took the map from Tessa and studied it under his own light. His jaw tightened. Why didn't the analysts catch this? Because they're not looking at it like a sniper would, Tessa said. They're counting buildings and vehicles. I'm counting firing positions. Rourke stood up, all 6'3" of him, and crossed the bay. He stopped in front of Tessa, towering over her like a pissed-off mountain. Let me tell you something, sweetheart. I've been doing this for 12 years. I've been shot at in 7 countries. I've pulled more people out of more shitholes than you've had birthdays. So when some cherry-ass boot fresh out of sniper school tries to rewrite the mission brief an hour before go time, yeah, I'm going to have a problem with that. Tessa didn't blink. Noted. Noted. Rourke's laugh was acid. That's it? Noted? What do you want me to say? You've got more experience, I get it, but experience doesn't change what's on the map. You're a kid. And you're emotional, Tessa replied flatly. Which one of us is the bigger problem right now? Someone in the back of the bay muttered, "Oh, damn." Rourke's face went red. For a second it looked like he might actually take a swing, but Carver stepped between them, one hand up. All right, enough. Rourke, sit your ass down. Vale, stow the map. We're going with the original plan. If the numbers are off, we'll adapt on the ground. Sir, I said stow it, Vale. Tessa folded the map without another word and slipped it back into her vest. She could feel the weight of a dozen stares on her, most of them hostile. She didn't care. She'd been the outsider her entire life. This was just another day. The loadmaster's voice crackled over the intercom. 5 minutes to drop zone. Get ready. The team moved like a machine, rifles checked, mags seated, night vision mounted. Tessa pulled her rifle from its case, a custom-built .300 Win mag with a suppressor, Schmidt and Bender scope, and a stock worn smooth by 10,000 hours of her father's hands before it became hers. She checked the chamber, confirmed the 0, and slung it across her back. Beside her, Hatch was adjusting his own kit. He glanced over, voice low enough that only she could hear. For what it's worth, I think you're right about the numbers. Doesn't matter, Tessa said. They're not going to listen. They might, after the first shots get fired. That'll be too late. Hatch grinned, dark humor in his eyes. Then I guess you better be as good as your file says you are. Tessa didn't answer. She just tightened the straps on her plate carrier and waited for the ramp to drop. The desert hit them like a furnace when they stepped off the aircraft. Even at night, the heat was oppressive, thick, dry, invasive. It crawled under armor and turned sweat into salt. The sky above was black and endless, scattered with stars so bright they looked like holes punched in the fabric of reality. The only sound was the fading roar of the C-130's engines as it climbed back into the dark and disappeared. 12 operators and one 18-year-old sniper stood in a loose line on a stretch of sand and rock, weapons ready, eyes adjusting to the green-tinged world of night vision. The compound was 2 kilometers north, tucked into a shallow valley. From this distance, it was just a smudge of darker black against the terrain. Carver raised a fist. The team moved. They traveled in a staggered column, spacing themselves to minimize the damage from a single IED or ambush. Tessa was near the rear, moving quietly, rifle slung across her chest, eyes scanning the ridgelines. The others moved with the confidence of men who'd done this 100 times before. Fast, efficient, professional. But Tessa could feel it. The tension in the air, the way shadows seemed to shift and breathe, the unnatural silence pressing down from the hills. She keyed her radio. "Overwatch, do you have thermals on those ridges?" A voice crackled back. Hatch, who'd taken up a position on a small rise behind them with a spotter scope. "Negative thermals, too much interference from the rocks. Can't get a clean read." "That's intentional," Tessa said. "They're using heat-blocking blankets." "How do you know?" "Because if I was setting up an ambush, that's what I'd do." Rourke's voice cut in, harsh and clipped. "Radio discipline, Vale. Save the tactical theories for your blog." Tessa didn't respond. She just kept moving, every instinct screaming that they were walking into something bad. The compound came into view as they crested a low dune. It was bigger than the photos suggested, 4 main structures arranged in a rough square, surrounded by a crumbling stone wall. Rusted vehicles sat in the courtyard. A generator hummed somewhere inside. No lights, no movement, just the skeletal outline of a place waiting to wake up. Carver raised a fist again. The team halted. "Rourke, take your fire team and breach the east gate. Hatch, you've got overwatch from the high ground. Vale, you're with me. We'll cover the north approach and provide support." Tessa moved into position beside a cluster of rocks that gave her a clean line of sight into the compound. She deployed her bipod, settled into a prone position, and glassed the area through her scope. Her breathing slowed, her heartbeat steadied. And then she saw them. Shapes, just barely visible, moving along the ridgeline to the west, low, deliberate, tactical. Not random. Coordinated. "Contact west," she whispered into the radio. "Multiple hostiles on the ridge, approximately 400 meters." "I don't see anything," Carver said. "They're using camouflage, thermal and visual. You won't see them until they shoot." "Vale, if you don't have a confirmed visual, don't call it in." "I do have a confirmed visual." "Then take the shot." Tessa hesitated. The angle was difficult. The wind was gusting. And if she missed, she'd give away their position before they were ready. "Negative," she said. "Not without a clear target." Rourke's team was already moving toward the east gate, boots crunching over gravel. Tessa watched them through her scope, waiting for the moment she knew was coming. It came 30 seconds later. The night exploded. Muzzle flashes erupted from 3 directions at once: the ridge, the compound, and a hidden position to the south they hadn't even seen. Tracers screamed through the darkness like angry hornets. Rourke's team hit the ground, scrambling for cover as bullets chewed apart the sand around them. "Contact! Contact east! Taking fire from the ridge! Where the fuck did they come from?" Tessa was already moving. She shifted her aim toward the ridgeline, found the first muzzle flash, calculated wind and drop in half a second, and squeezed the trigger. The rifle punched her shoulder. 400 meters away, a man's head snapped back and he dropped. She cycled the bolt, found the next target, fired. Another drop. "Machine gun! Machine gun south!" Tessa swung her rifle toward the sound. A PKM had opened up from a sandbagged position near the compound's south wall, ripping apart the landscape with a sustained burst. Rourke's team was pinned, unable to move, unable to return effective fire. Their primary marksman, a guy named Ortiz, was trying to take the shot. He fired twice. Both misses. The wind was brutal, swirling in unpredictable eddies that made long-range shooting a nightmare. "I can't get him," Ortiz shouted. "Wind's too strong." Carver's voice crackled over the radio, tight with stress. "Hatch, can you take the MG?" "Negative. Wrong angle. I don't have line of sight." "Then who the hell—" "I've got it," Tessa said. She didn't wait for permission. She just shifted her position, found the machine gunner in her scope, and made the corrections. The man was moving, adjusting his aim, firing in controlled bursts. She'd have maybe 2 seconds before he locked onto Rourke's position and turned them into red mist. 1 breath, 1 heartbeat. Fire. The suppressor coughed. 600 meters away, the machine gunner's chest exploded. He slumped forward, and the PKM went silent. "Guns down!" someone shouted. But Tessa was already tracking the next threat. A fighter on the ridge was setting up an RPG, kneeling behind a rock, aiming toward the east gate where Rourke's team was still pinned. She put a round through his spine before he could fire. The launcher clattered down the slope. "Jesus Christ," Hatch muttered over the radio. "Who's making these shots?" "Vale," Carver said, voice sharp with surprise. Tessa didn't acknowledge it. She was too busy working. Target, aim, fire, cycle. Target, aim, fire. Each shot was surgical. Each one eliminated a position that could have wiped out the assault team. In 90 seconds, she dropped 7 hostiles. But there were still more. "Rourke, you need to move now," Carver barked. "We're trying," Rourke shouted back. "They've got us locked down." Tessa glassed the area around Rourke's position. 3 militants were moving through the ruins toward his team's flank, using the buildings for cover. If they got into position, Rourke and his men would be surrounded. She started dropping them one by one. First man, center mass. Down. Second man, tried to run. Took him through the side. Down. Third man. Smart enough to freeze behind cover, Tessa waited, watched. The moment he shifted to peek around the corner, she put a round through the gap. Down. "Flanks clear," she called. Rourke didn't thank her. He just moved, screaming at his team to get up and push forward. They hit the east gate hard, blowing the lock with a breaching charge and flooding into the compound courtyard. And that's when the real hell started. Gunfire erupted from inside the buildings. Automatic weapons, overlapping fields of fire. A kill box designed to shred anyone who made it past the outer wall. Rourke's team scattered, diving behind vehicles and low walls as rounds punched through metal and stone. "They're everywhere!" "How many are there?" Tessa's jaw tightened. "I told you." She started working through the windows, identifying targets by muzzle flash and silhouette. One by one, the shooters inside the compound began to drop. A man leaning out of a second-story window. Gone. A fighter rushing across the courtyard. Gone. Another setting up behind a burnt-out truck. Gone. Her rifle was getting hot. The barrel shimmered in the night air, but she didn't slow down. Carver was on the radio coordinating the assault, trying to make sense of the chaos. "Hatch, I need a count. How many hostiles are we dealing with?" "At least 25, maybe more," Hatch replied. "This is way beyond what Intel said." "No shit," Rourke snarled. Tessa's voice cut through the chatter, calm and cold. "I need to reposition. I don't have angles on the interior." "Negative," Carver said. "Stay where you are." "If I stay here, your team's going to get chewed up." "That's an order, Vale." Tessa stared through her scope at the chaos unfolding below. Men were bleeding. Cover was disintegrating. The mission was seconds away from collapsing into a massacre. She made a decision. "Copy that, sir," she said. Then she grabbed her rifle and started moving. Carver realized what she was doing about 10 seconds too late. Vale, what are you doing?" But Tessa was already halfway down the slope, sprinting through the darkness toward the compound's north wall. She moved fast, low, rifle across her chest, every step calculated to avoid silhouetting herself against the skyline. Bullets cracked past her. Someone inside the compound had spotted her movement. She didn't slow down. She just ran harder, hit the base of the wall, and pressed herself flat against the stone. Her radio was screaming, Carver's voice, Rourke's voice, Hatch trying to provide cover fire. She ignored all of it. There was a gap in the wall about 20 meters to her left, a section that had collapsed during some previous battle. She moved toward it, staying low, using the shadows. When she reached the gap, she peeked through. The interior courtyard was a war zone. Rourke's team was hunkered down behind a shot-up cargo truck, returning fire but unable to advance. 3 militants were trying to flank them from the west. Another 2 were on a rooftop, raining down shots from above. Tessa brought her rifle up and started working. Rooftop shooter number 1. Headshot through the scope. Down. Rooftop shooter number 2. Tried to duck. She waited. He peeked. Down. The 3 flankers realized someone was shooting from a new angle and turned to locate her. Big mistake. She dropped all 3 in less than 5 seconds. Rourke's voice crackled over the radio, breathless and stunned. "Who the hell is shooting from inside the compound?" "It's Vale," Hatch said. "She went over the wall." "She what?" Tessa didn't have time to explain. She moved deeper into the compound, clearing corners, checking doorways. Her training took over. Move, clear, breathe, shoot. The rifle became an extension of her body. Every motion was automatic. She found 2 more fighters hiding inside a storage room, waiting to ambush the assault team from behind. She put them down before they even knew she was there. Then she heard it. A voice on the enemy radio frequency. Arabic, fast and panicked. She didn't speak the language fluently, but she recognized enough words to understand. Explosives. Bunker. Detonation. Her stomach dropped. She keyed her own radio. "Carver, the hostages are in a bunker, and it's rigged to blow." Silence. Then Carver's voice, tight and cold. "How do you know?" "I'm monitoring their comms. They're talking about detonation protocols." "Can you locate the bunker?" Tessa moved through the compound, rifle up, eyes scanning. She spotted a set of metal doors set into the ground near the center of the courtyard, partially hidden under a tarp. "Found it. Southeast corner, underground entrance." "Do not approach," Carver ordered. "Wait for the breach team." But the breach team was still pinned down, and Tessa could hear the panic escalating on the enemy frequency. They were running out of time. She moved toward the bunker doors. And then the compound erupted in gunfire again, this time from a direction no one expected. Reinforcements. A technical truck mounted with a heavy machine gun roared through the main gate, spraying the courtyard with .50 caliber rounds. The vehicle was chaos incarnate, tearing apart cover, forcing Rourke's team to scatter. Tessa dove behind a low wall as rounds chewed through the stone inches from her head. Dust exploded. Fragments stung her face. The truck swung around, searching for targets. She didn't have a shot. Wrong angle. Wrong weapon. A rifle round wouldn't stop a technical. But then she saw him. The gunner. Exposed. Standing behind the mounted weapon, visible from the chest up. It was an impossible shot. The truck was moving. The gunner was moving. Wind, dust, adrenaline, all of it stacked against her. Tessa took 3 seconds to breathe, then she fired. The gunner's head snapped back. He collapsed into the truck bed, and the machine gun went silent. The driver panicked, swerving wildly. The technical smashed into a wall and stalled. Rourke's team capitalized instantly, pouring fire into the cab. The driver slumped. The truck was done. "Clear," Rourke shouted. But it wasn't clear, not yet, because at that exact moment, deep beneath the compound, something started beeping. Tessa heard it through the metal doors of the bunker. A timer, counting down. And she had no idea how much time was left. The beeping was faint but rhythmic, like a mechanical heartbeat counting down to extinction. Tessa pressed her ear against the metal bunker door and felt the vibration through the steel, electronic, precise, unforgiving. A timer. Maybe minutes. Maybe seconds. There was no way to know without opening it, and opening it might trigger the whole thing to blow. "Carver," she said into her radio, voice steady despite the chaos around her. "I'm at the bunker entrance. I can hear a timer." Static crackled, then Carver's voice, sharp and stressed. "Do not touch that door. We need EOD. We don't have time for EOD. Vale, that is a direct order. Step away from the bunker and wait for..." An explosion tore through the western wall of the compound. Not the bunker. Something else. A grenade or an RPG. The shockwave rolled across the courtyard, slamming Tessa against the bunker door. Her ears rang. Dust and smoke billowed through the air, turning the world into a nightmare of shadows and screaming. She pushed herself upright, coughing, tasting copper and grit. Through the haze, she could see Rourke's team scrambling to regroup. One man was down, clutching his leg. Another was dragging him toward cover while the rest laid down suppressing fire. More gunfire erupted from the northern buildings. The militants weren't retreating, they were regrouping, adapting, and every second that passed was another second closer to the hostages being vaporized underground. Tessa grabbed the bunker door handle. It was locked. Heavy padlock, military grade. She pulled her sidearm and aimed at the lock mechanism, but before she could fire, someone tackled her from the side. She hit the ground hard, ribs screaming, the air punched out of her lungs. A man, big, bearded, wearing tactical black, rolled on top of her, hands going for her throat. His eyes were wild with rage and fear, spit flying as he shouted something in Arabic. Tessa couldn't breathe. Couldn't reach her knife. Her rifle was 3 feet away. Might as well have been on another planet. She did the only thing she could. She drove her thumb into his eye socket. The man howled and reared back. Tessa bucked him off, rolled, grabbed her rifle, and swung it like a club. The stock connected with his jaw. Bone cracked. He went down hard and didn't get back up. She was still gasping for air when Rourke's voice exploded over the radio. "We need fire support north side, now!" Tessa looked up. 3 militants were rushing Rourke's position from a gap in the northern wall, moving fast, weapons up, coordinated. The assault team was pinned down by fire from the rooftops and couldn't turn to engage the new threat. She brought her rifle up, still on her knees, and fired 3 times in rapid succession. All 3 militants dropped mid-stride. Clear, she shouted. No response from Rourke. He was too busy trying not to die. Tessa turned back to the bunker door. The padlock was still intact. She aimed her sidearm again, but this time a voice stopped her. Wait! She spun. Hatch was sprinting across the courtyard, head low, carrying a small breaching charge. He slid in beside her, breathing hard, eyes scanning the area. Carver sent me, he said to Sham. You're not blowing this door open with a 9mm. Then do it fast. Hatch slapped the charge onto the lock, armed it, and grabbed Tessa by the vest. Move! They dove behind a concrete barrier just as the charge detonated. The explosion was sharp and localized, blowing the lock apart in a spray of molten metal. Smoke poured from the door. Tessa was already moving. She yanked the door open and descended into darkness. The stairs were narrow, steep, carved out of raw earth and reinforced with rotting wood beams. The air was thick and hot, smelling of mildew and something chemical. Maybe the explosives, maybe just decades of decay. A single emergency light flickered at the bottom of the stairwell, casting everything in sickly red. Tessa moved down carefully, rifle raised, finger on the trigger. Behind her, Hatch followed, his own weapon sweeping the corners. The beeping was louder now, closer. It came from somewhere deeper in the bunker. At the bottom of the stairs, the corridor split into two directions. Left led to what looked like storage. Right led toward the sound of the timer. Tessa went right. The hallway was claustrophobic, barely wide enough for one person. Exposed wiring hung from the ceiling. Water dripped somewhere in the dark. And every few seconds, that goddamn beeping. She reached a junction and froze. Voices. Two men, speaking Arabic, somewhere just ahead. She couldn't see them yet, but she could hear them arguing. One voice was calm, giving orders. The other was panicked, frantic. Tessa glanced back at Hatch. He nodded. They moved forward together, silent as ghosts. The corridor opened into a small chamber lit by battery-powered lanterns, and there they were. The hostages. 3 people, 2 women, 1 man, bound to chairs in the center of the room, duct tape over their mouths, eyes wide with terror. One of the women had dried blood on her forehead. The man looked half-conscious, head lolling, and standing behind them, holding a cell phone wired to a brick of C4 strapped to the wall, was a man in his 50s with a graying beard and the eyes of someone who had nothing left to lose. The commander. He saw Tessa the same moment she saw him. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then he raised the phone and put his thumb over the screen. Stop, he said in accented English. 1 more step and I detonate. Tessa lowered her rifle slightly but kept it ready. Her mind was racing, calculating angles, distances, probabilities. The explosives were behind the hostages. If she shot the commander and he dropped the phone, it might trigger. If she didn't shoot him, he'd blow it anyway. She needed time. You don't want to do this, she said quietly. The commander smiled. It was the saddest, most broken smile she'd ever seen. You have no idea what I want. You want leverage. You want a way out. Killing these people doesn't give you that. It gives me justice. It gives you nothing. He pressed his thumb harder against the screen. You think I care? You think I care about walking away? My family is dead. My home is gone. This... He gestured around the bunker with his free hand. This is all I have left, and I will take as many of you with me as I can. Behind Tessa, Hatch shifted his weight slightly, trying to get a better angle. The commander noticed. Tell your friend to stop moving or I push the button. Hatch froze. Tessa took a slow breath. Her heart was hammering, but her voice stayed calm. What's your name? The commander blinked, surprised by the question. Why do you care? Because if I'm going to die down here, I'd like to know who I'm dying with. He stared at her for a long moment. Then quietly, Khalid. Khalid, Tessa repeated. I'm Tessa. That's Hatch. And those 3 people behind you, they're not soldiers. They're aid workers, teachers. They came here to help. They came here for their own guilt, Khalid spat, to feel better about what their country does. Maybe. Or maybe they came here because they actually give a damn. Tessa took a small step forward. But you already know that. That's why you haven't blown them up yet. Khalid's jaw tightened. You don't know anything about me. I know you've had that phone in your hand for the last 2 minutes and you haven't pressed the button. I know you're stalling, which means part of you wants another option. There is no other option. There's always another option. Khalid's hand trembled. The phone wavered, and in that moment Tessa saw it. The fracture, the exhaustion, the tiny sliver of doubt. But before she could press the advantage, Rourke's voice exploded over the radio. "Bunker team, we are under heavy contact. If you don't get those hostages out in the next 60 seconds, we're pulling back." The sudden noise shattered the fragile tension. Khalid's eyes went hard again. His thumb hovered over the screen. "You're out of time," he said. Tessa made a decision. She lowered her rifle completely and stepped forward, hands raised. "What are you doing?" Hatch hissed. "Buying time," Tessa said. She looked at Khalid. "If you want to blow us up, fine. But let me cut them loose first. Let them walk out of here. Then you and I can finish this conversation." Khalid laughed, but it was hollow. "You would stay." "I would." "You're lying." "Try me." Khalid stared at her, searching for deception. Tessa met his gaze without flinching. She meant every word. If it came down to it, she would trade her life for theirs. It wasn't heroism. It was just math. 3 lives for 1. Khalid's hand shook harder. The phone dipped slightly. And that's when Hatch made his move. He stepped sideways, angling for a shot, trying to get a clean line on Khalid without hitting the hostages. It was a good plan. It might have even worked. But Khalid saw it. He screamed something in Arabic and jammed his thumb down on the screen. Tessa didn't think. She just reacted. She dove forward, knocked one of the hostages' chairs sideways, and threw herself on top of the group as the world turned into fire and thunder. The explosion was deafening. The shockwave slammed into her like a freight train, lifting her off the ground and hurling her against the wall. Light and heat and pressure all at once. Her ears stopped working. Her vision went white, then black, then nothing. Potunk. When Tessa woke up, she was choking on dust. Her entire body was one massive bruise. Her left arm wouldn't move right. Her ears were ringing so loud it felt like her skull was splitting open. But she was alive. She pushed herself upright, gasping, coughing, trying to make sense of the wreckage around her. The bunker chamber was half collapsed. Debris everywhere, smoke so thick she could barely see 3 feet. "Hatch!" she croaked. "Hatch!" No answer. She crawled forward, feeling along the ground, trying to find him. Her hand hit something soft, a body. She pulled at it, rolled it over. It was one of the hostages. The man. Still breathing. Unconscious, but alive. Tessa kept searching. Found the second hostage, one of the women, pinned under a fallen beam. Tessa tried to lift it, but her arm gave out. Pain exploded through her shoulder. Something was torn. Maybe broken. She gritted her teeth and tried again, using her legs this time. The beam shifted. The woman gasped and scrambled free, coughing, bleeding from a gash on her forehead, but mobile. "Can you walk?" Tessa asked. The woman nodded, dazed. "Then get him out of here." Tessa pointed at the unconscious man. "Follow the corridor back to the stairs. There's a team up top. Go." The woman hesitated, looking around frantically. "Where's Sarah?" "I'll find her. Go. Now." The woman grabbed the man under his arms and started dragging him toward the corridor. Tessa turned back to the wreckage, searching for the third hostage. She found her 30 seconds later, half buried under rubble, unconscious but breathing. Tessa pulled her free, slung her over her good shoulder, and started moving. Every step was agony. Her ribs felt like broken glass. Her shoulder screamed, but she kept moving, one foot in front of the other, until she reached the stairs. That's where she found Hatch. He was sitting against the wall, one hand pressed to his side, blood seeping through his fingers. His face was pale, his breathing was shallow. "Stupid, heroic kid," he muttered when he saw her. Tessa set the hostage down gently and knelt beside him. "How bad?" "Bad enough." Hatch coughed, winced. "Shrapnel. Think it got my liver." "Can you walk?" "Can you fly?" "That's not helpful." Hatch tried to smile, but it came out as a grimace. "Get the hostages out. I'll cover the exit. I'm not leaving you." Wasn't a request, Vale. Tessa looked at him, really looked at him. He was dying. Maybe not in the next 5 minutes, but soon. And he knew it. "Hatch, go." His voice was firm, final. "Someone's got to make sure you get the win." Tessa wanted to argue, wanted to tell him to shut up and let her carry him out. But the gunfire above them was intensifying. The compound was turning into a meat grinder, and she had 2 unconscious hostages who couldn't defend themselves. She grabbed Hatch's rifle and handed it to him, then squeezed his shoulder once. "Don't die," she said. "Do my best." Tessa picked up the hostage again and started climbing the stairs. The courtyard was hell when she emerged. The compound was fully engaged now, militants pouring in from reinforcements, Rourke's team barely holding the line, tracers crisscrossing the air like deadly fireflies. The technical was burning. Bodies littered the ground, and somewhere in the chaos, Carver was screaming orders over the radio. Tessa stumbled toward the east gate, half carrying, half dragging the hostage. Her vision was swimming. Her legs felt like they were made of concrete. A militant stepped out from behind a wall, rifle raised. Tessa dropped the hostage, drew her sidearm, and fired 3 times before the man could pull the trigger. He fell. She picked up the hostage again and kept moving. "Vale!" Carver's voice. "Where the hell are you?" "East Gate," Tessa gasped. "I've got a hostage. 2 more are coming. We're falling back. Extraction is inbound 2 minutes out. I need 3. "You don't have 3. Tessa made it to the gate just as the first hostage, the woman, emerged from the bunker entrance, still dragging the unconscious man. Tessa set her own hostage down and ran back to help. Together, they got both unconscious hostages to the gate. Rourke's team was laying down, covering fire, creating a corridor of suppression that led toward the extraction point, a clearing 200 meters outside the compound where a Black Hawk was already descending, rotors screaming. "Move! Move! Move!" Rourke was shouting, firing in controlled bursts, teeth bared, face streaked with blood and soot. Tessa grabbed one hostage. The woman grabbed the other. They ran. Bullets kicked up dirt around them. An RPG screamed overhead and detonated against the compound wall, sending a shower of stone and shrapnel across the courtyard. Someone was screaming. Someone else was returning fire. Everything was noise and chaos and adrenaline. They reached the helicopter. Hands grabbed the hostages and hauled them aboard. Tessa turned to go back for Hatch, but Carver grabbed her vest. "He's gone, Vale." "He's still in there. He's gone." Tessa tried to pull free, but Carver was stronger. He dragged her into the helicopter just as the pilot pulled up. The compound fell away beneath them, shrinking into a burning smudge against the desert. And Tessa watched it disappear, knowing Hatch was still down there. The flight back to base was silent, except for the rotor noise and the shallow breathing of the wounded. Tessa sat on the floor of the cargo bay, back against the bulkhead, staring at nothing. Her hands were shaking. She couldn't make them stop. One of the medics tried to check her injuries, but she waved him off. She wasn't bleeding, not externally, anyway. Across from her, Rourke sat with his head in his hands. His team had lost 2 men. 3 more were wounded. The mission was technically a success. They'd recovered the hostages, but it sure as hell didn't feel like one. Carver was on the radio giving a debrief to command. His voice was flat, mechanical, combat autopilot. No one looked at Tessa. No one said anything. She closed her eyes and tried not to think about Hatch sitting in that bunker, bleeding out, waiting for an extraction that would never come. They landed at Forward Operating Base Vanguard just after dawn. The sky was turning pale orange, the kind of beautiful that felt obscene after a night like that. Tessa climbed out of the helicopter on shaking legs and walked straight toward the barracks. Behind her, the hostages were being whisked away by medical staff. Command was already swarming Carver for a full report. She made it about 50 feet before Rourke caught up with her. "Vale." She kept walking. "Vale, stop." She stopped, turned, looked at him with eyes that had gone cold and flat. Rourke opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. "You were right. About the numbers." Tessa said nothing. "I should have listened." Still nothing. Rourke rubbed his face, suddenly looking 10 years older. "Hatch. Hatch said you saved his life twice before he even made it to the bunker. Said you dropped more hostiles than the rest of us combined. Is there a point to this?" Tessa's voice was quiet, dangerous. "The point is," Rourke swallowed hard, "the point is, I was wrong about you, we all were." Tessa stared at him for a long moment. Then she turned and walked away. She didn't want his apology, didn't want his respect. She wanted Hatch to still be alive. The debriefing happened 6 hours later in a cramped office that smelled like stale coffee and regret. Tessa sat across from Carver and a lieutenant colonel she didn't recognize. Her arm was in a sling now. The medics had confirmed a torn rotator cuff, 3 cracked ribs, and a mild concussion. She'd refused pain meds. She wanted to feel everything. The lieutenant colonel, a man named Briggs with iron gray hair and a chest full of ribbons, tapped a folder on the desk. Preliminary reports confirm 25 enemy KYA. 18 of those are attributed to you. Tessa said nothing. You also disobeyed a direct order when you entered the compound, Carver added. His voice was careful, neutral. Yes, sir. You put yourself and the mission at risk. Yes, sir. Briggs leaned forward. You also saved the lives of 3 hostages and most of your assault team. Sergeant Hatch's last transmission credited you with keeping him alive long enough to set the breaching charge. Tessa's throat tightened. She didn't trust herself to speak. Briggs studied her for a moment. You're 18 years old. Yes, sir. You've been active for less than 3 months. Yes, sir. And you just completed one of the most effective sniper performances I've seen in 20 years of combat operations. Briggs closed the folder. How? Tessa met his eyes. My father trained me. Your file says your father was a contractor, private security. My file doesn't know the whole story. Carver frowned. What does that mean? Tessa hesitated. She'd spent her entire life keeping her father's secrets. But sitting here, covered in bruises and blood, watching men try to make sense of something they couldn't understand, she was tired of hiding. My father wasn't just a contractor, she said quietly. He was a sniper. One of the best. He worked jobs no one talks about in places that don't exist on any map. When he retired, he had enemies, people who wanted him dead. So he disappeared, changed his name, started over. And he trained you, Briggs said. Every day from the time I was 6 years old. He said if something happened to him, I needed to be able to protect myself. Tessa's voice cracked slightly. He died when I was 16. Heart attack, and I didn't know what else to do, so I enlisted. The room went quiet. Carver exhaled slowly. Vale, I'm not asking for sympathy, Tessa cut him off. I'm just telling you why I can do what I do. My father taught me that being small doesn't mean being weak. Being young doesn't mean being useless. And being underestimated is the most powerful weapon you can have. Briggs nodded slowly. Your father sounds like a smart man. He was. The lieutenant colonel stood, extending his hand. Tessa shook it. Get some rest, Specialist Vale, Briggs said. Something tells me we're going to need you again soon. Tessa walked out of the debriefing into the blinding desert sun. Her body ached. Her mind was numb. But beneath it all, something had shifted. The men who'd laughed at her were quiet now. The commanders who'd doubted her were listening. And somewhere out there, in a bunker she'd never see again, Hatch had died believing she was worth it. She would make damn sure he was right. Tessa didn't make it to her bunk. She was halfway across the compound when the alarm siren started wailing, long, piercing blasts that turned the entire base into controlled chaos. Soldiers poured out of buildings, grabbing gear, sprinting toward staging areas. Helicopters spooled up on the flight line, rotors beginning their slow acceleration toward takeoff speed. Tessa stopped walking. Her entire body was screaming for rest, but her instincts were screaming louder. Something was wrong. She turned and ran toward the operations center, ignoring the pain in her ribs, the fire in her shoulder. She burst through the door just as Carver was strapping on his vest, face grim, radio pressed to his ear. What's happening? Tessa demanded. Carver looked up, surprised to see her. You should be in medical. What's happening, sir? He hesitated, then made a decision. Second convoy got hit 20 minutes ago. Ambush on Route Silver 5 clicks west of here. 3 vehicles disabled, 12 personnel pinned down, heavy casualties. QRF is spinning up now. Quick reaction force. The base's emergency response team. I'm going, Tessa said. Negative. You're injured and you haven't slept in? I'm going. Carver stared at her, saw the steel in her eyes, the set of her jaw. He'd seen that look before, right before she'd disobeyed his orders and saved the entire mission. He swore under his breath. Grab your kit. You've got 2 minutes. Tessa was already moving. The QRF Blackhawk lifted off 90 seconds later with 8 operators, 2 medics, and 1 battered 18-year-old sniper who refused to quit. Tessa sat in the doorway, legs dangling over the edge, rifle across her lap, watching the desert blur past below. The flight commander, a captain named Rhodes with a scar across his cheek and eyes like flint, was briefing the team over the intercom. Ambush site is a narrow pass between 2 ridgelines. Perfect kill zone. Convoy drove straight into it. Lead vehicle hit an IED, tail vehicle got hit by RPG. Middle truck tried to reverse and got disabled by small arms fire. Enemy count estimated at 40 plus, entrenched positions on both ridges. Survivors? Someone asked. Unknown. Last radio contact was 8 minutes ago. They reported multiple wounded, ammunition running low, and enemy forces closing in. Tessa studied the terrain map on Rhodes's tablet. The pass was a natural choke point. Steep, rocky slopes on both sides, no cover in the valley below, nowhere to run. Whoever planned this ambush knew exactly what they were doing. "What's the exfil plan?" Rourke asked. He was part of the QRF, sitting across from Tessa, checking his magazine for the third time. "Fast rope into the valley, establish a perimeter around the survivors. Hold until the extraction birds arrive," Rhodes said. "In and out, 10 minutes max." "And if there's more than 40 hostiles?" "Then we improvise." Tessa didn't like it. The plan assumed they could get in fast enough to make a difference, assumed the survivors were still alive, assumed the enemy wouldn't have air defense waiting for them. Too many assumptions. But there was no other choice. 12 people were dying in that valley, and the QRF was their only hope. The Black Hawk dropped altitude, hugging the terrain, using the ridgelines for cover. Through the open door, Tessa could see smoke rising in the distance, black and thick, the kind that came from burning vehicles and burning people. 2 minutes, the pilot called out. The team stood, checked their harnesses, grabbed the fast ropes. Tessa slung her rifle and clipped in. Her shoulder protested, but she ignored it. Pain was just information. It didn't get to make decisions. The helicopter crested the final ridge and the ambush site came into view. It was worse than the report suggested. All 3 convoy vehicles were destroyed, burning hulks of twisted metal scattered across the valley floor. Bodies lay in the dirt, some moving, most not. The survivors had formed a desperate defensive position behind the wreckage. Maybe 7 or 8 people still returning fire, surrounded on 3 sides by militants who were advancing steadily, confident in their numerical superiority. And the ridgelines were crawling with shooters. "Contact left, contact right," the door gunner screamed, opening up with his minigun. The weapon roared, spitting out tracers that carved glowing lines through the air. The Black Hawk shuddered as bullets punched through the fuselage. Someone yelled. The pilot banked hard, trying to get them into position for the fast rope insertion. "Go, go, go!" Rhodes shouted. The first operator grabbed the rope and slid down, then the second, then Tessa. She dropped 15 feet and hit the ground running, rifle up, scanning for targets. All around her, the valley was exploding with gunfire. Tracers, muzzle flashes, the sharp crack of AKs, and the deeper boom of PK-MIs. The air smelled like cordite and burning rubber. "Form on me!" Rhodes was screaming, waving his team toward the defensive position. "Get those wounded loaded!" Tessa sprinted toward the wrecked convoy, keeping low, using the smoke for cover. A militant stepped out from behind a boulder 20 yards ahead. She shot him twice without breaking stride. She reached the survivors and dropped behind the burned-out chassis of the lead vehicle. 3 soldiers were there, 2 wounded, 1 barely conscious. A sergeant with captain's bars was coordinating fire, face covered in blood, one arm hanging useless. "QRF!" Tessa shouted. "We're getting you out!" The captain looked at her with eyes that had already accepted death. "About damn time. How many can walk?" 4? Maybe 5. "Then get them ready to move. Extraction bird inbound, 3 minutes." The captain barked orders at his remaining men. They started dragging the wounded toward the center of the perimeter, while Rhodes's team formed a defensive line, trying to hold back the advancing militants. But the enemy had them surrounded. Every time someone exposed themselves to return fire, bullets hammered the position from 3 different directions. They were trapped in a shrinking circle, and the militants knew it. Tessa scanned the ridge lines through her scope. Shooters everywhere. Too many targets, not enough time. Then she saw him. A man standing at the highest point on the eastern ridge, coordinating the attack. He had a radio in one hand and was gesturing with the other, directing his fighters into flanking positions. He wasn't taking cover. He didn't think he needed to. He was 800 meters away. Uphill. Wind gusting from the southwest at maybe 15 knots. It was an impossible shot. Tessa took it anyway. She settled into her rifle, found her breathing rhythm, calculated the drop and drift in 2 seconds. The world narrowed to that single point in space. A man who thought he was untouchable. She squeezed the trigger. The rifle punched her shoulder. 800 meters away, the commander's head snapped back and he crumpled. For 3 seconds, the entire eastern ridge went silent. Then chaos. The militants started shooting wildly, trying to figure out where the shot had come from. Their coordination collapsed. Fighters broke from their positions, confused, leaderless. Tessa started dropping them, one shooter trying to rally the others. Down. Another manning a PKM. Down. A third moving to take command. Down. "Who the hell is making those shots?" Rhodes screamed over the radio. "Vale," Rourke shouted back. "It's Vale." Tessa tuned them out. She was in the zone now, that place her father had taught her to find, where time slowed and the rifle became an extension of her nervous system. Target. Breathe. Fire. Target. Breathe. Fire. Every shot perfect. Every shot final. The eastern ridge started to crack. Militants were retreating, scrambling back over the rocks, abandoning their positions. But the western ridge was still active, and they were getting closer. "We need fire on the west side," Rhodes yelled. "Someone suppress that ridge." "I'm out," someone called back. "Changing mag. RPG, RPG, west." Tessa swung her rifle toward the western ridge and saw the threat, a fighter with an RPG tube on his shoulder, kneeling behind a rock, aiming directly at the QRF position. If that rocket hit, it would kill half the team. 600 meters. Moving target, 5 seconds to impact. Tessa didn't have time to calculate. She just aimed, led the target, and fired. The round hit the RPG tube itself. The explosion was massive, white-hot and violent, vaporizing the fighter and 2 others standing nearby. The shockwave rolled down the ridge, knocking fighters off their feet, sending rocks tumbling into the valley. "Holy shit!" someone screamed. Tessa was already tracking the next target, a machine gun nest. She put 3 rounds into it in 4 seconds, silencing the gun and killing the crew. The western ridge wavered. Then it broke. Fighters started fleeing, running back down the far side of the ridge, abandoning their weapons, abandoning the fight. Within 30 seconds, the entire ambush force was in full retreat. The valley fell into an eerie quiet, broken only by the sound of helicopter rotors in the distance. Rhodes stared at Tessa like she'd just performed a magic trick. "What the hell are you?" Tessa ejected her magazine, checked the remaining rounds, and reloaded. "Someone who's really tired of watching people die." Oh, the extraction helicopters arrived 2 minutes later. The wounded were loaded first, 5 critical, 3 stable, 2 who wouldn't make it but deserved a ride home anyway. The QRF provided security while the medics worked, but there was no return fire. The militants were gone, scattered across miles of desert, running for their lives. Tessa sat on the ramp of the lead helicopter, watching the sun climb higher into a sky that didn't care about any of this. Her hands were shaking again. She made them stop. Rourke dropped down beside her, breathing hard, face streaked with dust and sweat. He didn't say anything for a long time, just sat there, staring at the wreckage. Finally, he spoke. 23. Tessa looked at him. 23 confirmed kills in the last 6 hours, Rourke said. Rhodes counted them. Plus the 18 from last night. That's 41 in one day. Math checks out. That's not... Rourke shook his head. That's not normal, Vale. That's not even in the realm of normal. You want me to apologize? I want you to tell me how. Tessa was quiet for a moment. Then she pulled something from her vest, a small worn photograph, edges frayed, colors faded. It showed a man in his 40s with kind eyes and a sniper rifle slung across his back, standing next to a little girl with braids and a too big smile. My father, Tessa said quietly, he told me once that being a sniper isn't about pulling the trigger. It's about seeing the world differently, understanding angles no one else sees, noticing patterns everyone else misses, and when it matters most, having the courage to take the shot no one else believes is possible. Rourke studied the photograph. He teach you all this? Every day, for 10 years. Tessa tucked the photo away. He said if I was going to survive in a world that underestimated me, I needed to be better than everyone else. Not just good, better. So that's what I became. Your father raised a weapon. My father raised a survivor. Tessa's voice hardened. There's a difference. The helicopter lifted off. The valley fell away beneath them, leaving behind the wreckage and the bodies and the ghosts of people who wouldn't be going home. The base erupted when they landed. Word had spread fast. The QRF had pulled off an impossible rescue. Zero friendly. KIA, enemy forces routed. And at the center of it all was an 18-year-old girl who shot like she was born with a rifle in her hands. Tessa ignored the stares and the whispers and the people trying to shake her hand. She just wanted to find a quiet corner and sleep for a week. But the universe had other plans. Specialist Vale. The voice came from behind her, formal and sharp. Tessa turned. Lieutenant Colonel Briggs was standing there with two other officers she didn't recognize, both colonels, both wearing expressions that said this was not a social visit. "Sir," Tessa said. Briggs gestured toward the operations center. "Walk with me." It wasn't a request. They moved through the compound in silence, Briggs in front, the two colonels flanking Tessa like she was under arrest. Other soldiers got out of their way, sensing the weight of whatever this was. Inside the operations center, Briggs led them to a secure briefing room and shut the door. One of the colonels activated a signal jammer. The other pulled up a classified file on the main screen. Tessa's file, but not the official one. This one was different, older, with photos and documents she'd never seen before. "Specialist Vale," Briggs said, voice neutral. "Do you know why you're here?" "No, sir." "We've been reviewing your personnel records, standard procedure after a performance like yours, and we found some inconsistencies." Tessa's stomach tightened. "What kind of inconsistencies?" One of the colonels stepped forward, a woman with silver hair and eyes like razors. "Your father, Marcus Vale, private contractor, deceased 3 years ago. We ran his background. The man doesn't exist prior to 18 years ago. No birth certificate, no school records, no military service, nothing." "He changed his name," Tessa said carefully. "I told you that." "You did. But what you didn't tell us is who he was before." The screen changed. A new photo appeared. A man in his 30s, military photo, dress uniform. He looked almost identical to Tessa's father. Same eyes, same jawline. But the name underneath was different. "Captain Elias Reeve," the silver-haired colonel said. "Delta Force. Sniper. Served in operations across 4 continents before being declared K-1A during a black op in Belarus in 2007. Except he wasn't KIA, was he?" Tessa felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. "I don't know what you're talking about." "He faked his death," Briggs said quietly. "Disappeared. Started over with a new identity, and then he trained you to follow in his footsteps. This is insane. This is the truth, Specialist. And we need to know why. Why would one of the most decorated snipers in modern military history fake his death and go into hiding? Who was he running from, and what did he tell you?" Tessa's heart was hammering. Her father had spent her entire childhood making her promise never to talk about his past, never to reveal who he really was. He'd said it would put them both in danger. Now she understood why. "I don't know," she said. "He never told me." The silver-haired colonel leaned forward. "We don't believe you. I don't care what you believe." "Specialist, my father is dead," Tessa said, voice shaking with barely controlled rage. "Whatever he was, whatever he did, it died with him. All he left me was his training. That's it." Briggs held up a hand, stopping the colonel from pressing further. He studied Tessa for a long moment, then made a decision. "Here's what's going to happen," he said. "You're going to be reassigned to a special operations task force, directly under my command. You'll operate with the same unit, but your missions will be different, more sensitive. And in exchange, we'll keep digging into your father's past. If there's something there that puts you at risk, we'll deal with it. Fair?" It wasn't fair. It was a trap disguised as an offer. But Tessa didn't have a choice. "Yes, sir." "Good. Dismissed." Tessa turned to leave, but Briggs stopped her. "One more thing, Specialist. Whatever your father was running from, I hope for your sake it doesn't come looking for you." The words followed her out of the room like a shadow. Wong. She made it back to her bunk this time. The room was empty, quiet, dim. Tessa closed the door, locked it, and sat down on the edge of her rack. Her hands were shaking again. This time she let them. Her father's face kept flashing through her mind. All those years, all those training sessions, all those quiet warnings about staying off the radar, about never drawing too much attention. And she'd just blown that into a million pieces by becoming the most talked about soldier on the base. She pulled out the photograph again. Her and her father, young and smiling before the world got complicated. before he died and left her alone with a rifle and a legacy she didn't fully understand. "I'm sorry, Dad," she whispered. "I didn't mean to—" A knock on the door cut her off. Tessa wiped her eyes and stood. "Who is it?" "Carver." She opened the door. The lieutenant looked exhausted, like he'd aged 10 years in the last 24 hours. "You okay?" he asked. "Fine." "That's not what I asked." Tessa stepped aside, letting him in. He closed the door and leaned against the wall, studying her. "They told me about your father," Carver said. "The real story." "There is no real story, just rumors and classified files." "Maybe. But I've seen what you can do, Vale. And that doesn't come from nowhere. That comes from someone who knew exactly what they were building." Tessa didn't respond. Carver sighed. "Look, I don't know what your father was mixed up in, and I don't care. What I care about is keeping you alive. Because something tells me whatever he ran from is going to come back around eventually. And when it does, you're going to need people watching your back." "Why do you care?" "Because you saved my team twice in one day. Because Hatch died believing you were worth it. And because—" Carver paused, choosing his words carefully. "Because I've been doing this long enough to know talent when I see it. And you're not just talented, Vale. You're something else entirely." Tessa felt something crack inside her chest, a small fracture in the armor she'd been wearing since her father died. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that." "You're supposed to survive," Carver said simply. "That's the only job that matters." He pushed off the wall and headed for the door. Before leaving, he turned back one more time. "Get some rest. We ship out again in 48 hours. And this time, no one's going to laugh when you walk on that plane." He left, closing the door quietly behind him. Tessa stood there alone, holding her father's photograph, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on her shoulders. The missions, the secrets, the ghosts of the past reaching into the present. Outside, the desert sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of blood and fire. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the wire, something was watching, waiting. Her father's enemies hadn't forgotten. They were coming. Tessa didn't sleep that night. She lay in her bunk staring at the ceiling, listening to the compound's night sounds, generators humming, distant radio chatter, the occasional roar of a departing helicopter. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Hatch bleeding out in that bunker, saw the commander with the detonator, saw her father's face in that photograph, young and alive, and carrying secrets that had followed him to the grave. And now those secrets were hers. At 400, she gave up on sleep and went to the gym. The small concrete building was empty at this hour, just rows of weights and punching bags and pull-up bars. Tessa wrapped her hands and started hitting the heavy bag, ignoring the screaming protest from her injured shoulder. Jab, cross, hook, each strike sending shockwaves of pain through her body. She didn't stop until her knuckles were bleeding through the wraps. "You're going to tear that shoulder apart." Tessa spun. Rourke was standing in the doorway, already in PT gear, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. "Didn't ask for a medical opinion," she said. "Not giving one, just stating a fact." Rourke walked over to the bench press and started loading plates. "Can't sleep either?" Tessa unwrapped her hands. "Something like that." They worked out in silence for a while, Tessa on the bag, Rourke on the weights. The only sounds were impact and breathing and the clank of iron on iron. Finally, Rourke sat up, wiping sweat from his face. "They're saying you might be the best shooter to come through here in 20 years. They're saying a lot of things. Are they right?" Tessa looked at him directly. "Does it matter?" "Yeah, it does." Rourke set the bar down. "Because if you're just good, you'll burn out in 6 months. But if you're actually the best, then you're going to get people killed." "That doesn't make sense." "Sure it does. The best shooters get sent on the worst missions. The impossible ones. The ones where command needs someone who can make miracles happen." Rourke's voice went quiet. "And eventually, the miracles run out." Tessa understood what he wasn't saying. He'd seen it before. Operators who were so good they became the solution to every unsolvable problem until one day the problem won. "My father used to say there's no such thing as an impossible shot," Tessa said. "Just shots you're not willing to take. Your father sounds like he had a death wish. He survived 20 years of combat. And then he died anyway." Rourke stood, grabbed his towel. "Look, Vale, I was wrong about you. We all were. You proved that. But proving you belong is the easy part. The hard part is staying alive long enough for it to matter. He left without waiting for a response. Tessa stood alone in the gym, blood dripping from her knuckles onto the concrete floor, wondering if Rourke was right. The briefing happened at 800 in the secure operations room. Tessa walked in to find the space packed: Briggs, Carver, Rhodes, Rourke, and a half dozen other officers she didn't recognize. Maps covered every wall. Satellite imagery glowed on multiple screens, and at the head of the table stood a man in civilian clothes, with silver gray hair and the kind of face that had seen things most people couldn't imagine. Briggs gestured for Tessa to sit. "Specialist Vale, this is Director Vaughn. He's with a federal agency that doesn't officially exist." Vaughn didn't offer his hand. He just studied Tessa with eyes that seemed to see straight through her. "I've read your file, both versions, the official one and the real one." "There is no real one," Tessa said. "Don't insult my intelligence, Specialist. We both know exactly who your father was. Captain Elias Reeve, Delta Force. 43 confirmed kills in operations spanning 7 countries. And then he disappeared after a mission in Belarus went sideways." Vaughn pulled out a chair and sat. "Want to know what that mission was?" Tessa's jaw tightened. "Not particularly." "Too bad. You need to hear this." Vaughn activated the main screen. A dossier appeared, heavily redacted, most of the text blacked out. "Your father was part of a joint task force hunting a man named Viktor Sokolov. Russian intelligence officer turned arms dealer, specialized in selling military technology to the highest bidder: missiles, drones, chemical weapons, you name it." "What does this have to do with me?" "I'm getting there. The mission was to eliminate Sokolov before he could sell a weapons package to a terrorist cell in Eastern Europe. Your father's team tracked him to a warehouse outside Minsk. The hit was supposed to be clean: sniper shot through a window, in and out, no witnesses." Vaughn paused, letting the weight settle. But Sokolov knew they were coming. He set a trap. Half the team was killed in the initial ambush. Your father barely escaped. When he made it back to friendly territory, he filed a report claiming Sokolov was dead. But he wasn't. Sokolov survived, and he put a bounty on your father's head, $5 million to whoever could find him and bring him in alive. The room went silent. Tessa felt ice spreading through her chest. "My father never told me any of this." "Of course he didn't. He was protecting you. He faked his death, erased his identity, and spent the rest of his life looking over his shoulder. And for 15 years it worked. Sokolov's people never found him." Vaughn leaned forward. "But now you've gone and put yourself on every intelligence radar in the Middle East, and that means Sokolov's going to find out." "Find out what?" "That Elias Reeve had a daughter, one who's just as dangerous as he was." Carver spoke up, voice tight. "Are you saying she's a target?" "I'm saying she's more than a target. She's leverage. Sokolov's been hunting your father's ghost for 15 years. Now he's got something better. A way to draw out anyone who might know what really happened in Belarus." Vaughn's eyes locked onto Tessa. "And he will come for you." Tessa's hands were flat on the table, steady, controlled. "Let him." "Excuse me?" "You heard me. If this Sokolov wants a fight, he can have one." Briggs shook his head. "Specialist, you don't understand what you're dealing with. Sokolov isn't some backwater militant. He's got resources, connections, entire networks at his disposal. If he decides you're worth his time, then I'll handle it. You're 18 years old. And I've dropped 41 hostiles in the last 24 hours, Tessa shot back. You want to keep reminding me I'm young, or you want to use the asset sitting in front of you? The room went dead quiet. Vaughn smiled, thin, cold, appraising. She's got fire, I'll give her that. Fire gets people killed, Briggs said. So does hesitation. Vaughn stood, began pacing. Here's the situation. We've been tracking Sokolov for years. He's slippery, paranoid, nearly impossible to pin down. But if he thinks he's got a shot at Elias Reeve's daughter, he'll move. He'll make contact, send someone to verify she's real, and when he does, we'll be ready. Carver's face darkened. You want to use her as bait. I want to use her as an opportunity. Absolutely not. It's not your call, Lieutenant. The hell it isn't. She's under my command. Not anymore. Vaughn slid a folder across the table to Briggs. As of 0600 this morning, Specialist Vale has been reassigned to a joint task force under my authority. Orders signed by the Pentagon. You can read them yourself. Briggs opened the folder. His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. The orders were legitimate. Tessa looked at Carver, saw the frustration and helplessness in his eyes. He wanted to fight this, but there was nothing he could do. She turned to Vaughn. What exactly are you proposing? We let it leak that you're here. Let Sokolov's intelligence network pick up on the fact that an 18-year-old sniper with your father's skill set just emerged out of nowhere. Then we wait for him to make contact. And when he does, we trace the connection, find his location, and put a bullet in his head. Vaughn's smile widened. With you pulling the trigger. Tessa considered this. It was risky, possibly suicidal, definitely a trap within a trap, but it was also a chance to end the threat her father had spent 15 years running from. I'm in, she said. Vale? Carver started. I said I'm in. Briggs stood. This is insane. You're talking about dangling a teenager in front of one of the most dangerous men alive. I'm talking about closing a case that's been open for 15 years, Vaughn countered, and using the perfect asset to do it. She's not an asset. She's a soldier. She's both, and she just volunteered. Vaughn looked at Tessa. You understand what you're agreeing to? This won't be a standard op. Sokolov won't send amateurs, he'll send professionals, killers, and they will try to take you alive. Then they'll fail. Confidence is good. Overconfidence is fatal. I'll take my chances. Vaughn studied her for another moment, then nodded. All right, we'll need you to make yourself visible. High-profile missions, interactions that get reported up the chain. We'll seed your name in intelligence channels, make it look organic. Within a week, Sokolov will know you exist. And then? And then we see what he does. The meeting broke up 15 minutes later. Most of the officers filed out, but Carver lingered. He waited until the room was empty, except for him and Tessa. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. Yes, I do. Why? Because of your father? Because of Hatch. Because of everyone who died yesterday. Because if I don't stop running from this, it'll follow me forever. Tessa met his eyes. My father spent 15 years hiding. I'm done hiding. Carver was quiet for a long moment. You know, this is exactly what they want. They're using you. Everyone uses everyone in this job. At least this time I get to choose. That's not... Carver stopped himself, ran a hand through his hair. Just be careful. Vaughn's a shark. He'll burn you the second you stop being useful. Then I'll stay useful. That's not how it works, Vale. You're not invincible. Never said I was. Tessa picked up her rifle case. But I'm the best chance they've got, and that's enough. She left Carver standing alone in the briefing room, looking like he'd just watched someone walk off a cliff. The next week was a blur of high-visibility operations. Tessa was attached to every major mission in the sector. Convoy escorts, raid support, overwatch for VYP movements. Everywhere she went, she performed. Perfectly. Publicly. Making sure her name got into every after-action report, every intelligence summary, every piece of chatter that might make its way up the chain to foreign networks. And people noticed. The base started treating her differently. The mocking was gone, replaced by something between respect and fear. Operators who'd dismissed her now asked for her input on shot placement and wind reading. Even Rourke had started treating her like an equal instead of a liability. But Tessa could feel the target forming on her back. Little things. Wrong things. A supply truck that showed up at the wrong time. A maintenance worker she'd never seen before asking too many questions about her schedule. A local interpreter who stared at her a second too long before looking away. They were probing, testing, trying to figure out who she was and whether she was worth the risk. On the 8th day, it happened. Tessa was returning from a patrol when her radio crackled with a priority alert. All units, report to operations immediately. We have a situation. She jogged to the operations center and found controlled chaos. Officers huddled around screens, radio traffic overlapping, tension thick enough to cut. Briggs saw her and waved her over. We just intercepted a communication. Encrypted, but our analysts cracked it. Someone's offering $10 million for information on an American sniper operating in this sector. Female, 18 years old, extraordinary skill set. Tessa's stomach tightened. Sokolov. Most likely, which means he knows you exist. Briggs pulled up a map. And he's not wasting time. We've got reports of a 3-vehicle convoy moving toward the border, heavily armed, probably carrying a team sent to verify your identity. Where are they now? 40 clicks northeast, heading for a safe house in a village called Al-Ram. If they make it there, They'll go to ground, and we'll lose them. Vaughn appeared from a side office, phone pressed to his ear, expression grim. He finished his call and looked at Tessa. This is it. The bait worked. Now we need to reel them in. What's the play? Tessa asked. We hit the convoy before they reach the safe house. Fast insertion, capture the team leader, extract intel on Sokolov's location. Vaughn's eyes were cold and calculating. And you're going to be the trigger puller. When? 1 hour. Helicopter's already spinning up. Carver stepped forward. She's not going alone. She's not going alone, Vaughn agreed. She's going with a hand-picked team. You included, Lieutenant, along with Rourke, Rhodes, and 4 others. This needs to be surgical. Tessa felt the familiar pre-mission adrenaline starting to flow. What if they're expecting us? They probably are. Sokolov's not stupid, but he also doesn't know what you're capable of. That's our edge. Vaughn handed her a tablet showing the convoy route. The ambush point is here, a narrow stretch of road between 2 hills. You'll have high ground, clear lines of sight, and about 90 seconds to disable the vehicles before they scatter. And if they don't scatter? If they decide to fight? Then you do what you do best. Vaughn's smile was sharp. You make them regret it. And 60 minutes later, Tessa was in the belly of a Blackhawk racing toward the ambush point. The team sat in silence, checking weapons, reviewing the mission brief on their tablets. This wasn't like the previous operations. This was personal, targeted, a trap designed to catch the people hunting her. Rourke sat across from her, expression unreadable. You ready for this? Always. That's not what I asked. Tessa met his eyes. These people killed my father's team. They've been hunting him for 15 years, and now they think they can use me to finish what they started. She chambered a round in her rifle. So yeah, I'm ready. Rhodes, the team leader, stood and addressed the group. Listen up. Rules of engagement are simple. Disable the vehicles, capture the team leader alive if possible, eliminate everyone else if necessary. Vale has primary on vehicle disabling. Rourke, your backup. The rest of us provide security and cut off escape routes. Questions? No one spoke. Good. We're 2 minutes out. Lock and load. The helicopter descended fast, hugging the terrain, using the hills for cover. Tessa could see the ambush point ahead, a stretch of dirt road winding through rocky terrain, perfect for what they were about to do. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. Target convoy in sight. 3 vehicles moving fast. You've got 60 seconds to get into position. The Blackhawk flared and hovered. The team fast roped down, boots hitting dirt, spreading out into predetermined positions. Tessa sprinted to a rocky outcrop that gave her elevation and clear sight lines on the road below. She deployed her bipod, settled into her rifle, and started calculating. Distance, 400 meters. Wind, minimal, maybe 5 knots from the east. Temperature hot, which meant less air density, which meant flatter trajectory. The convoy appeared, 3 SUVs moving in tight formation, kicking up dust. Heavily armored, probably reinforced glass. This wasn't going to be easy. I've got lead vehicle, Tessa said into her radio. Copy, Rourke replied. I've got tail. On my mark, Rhodes said. 3, 2, 1, mark. Tessa aimed for the lead vehicle's engine block and fired 3 times in rapid succession. The rounds punched through the hood, shredding metal and machinery. Steam erupted. The SUV lurched and died, blocking the road. Rourke took out the tail vehicle's tires, sending it into a spin. The middle vehicle tried to reverse, but Rhodes's team was already in position, blocking the road behind them. They were boxed in. Doors flew open. Armed men poured out, taking cover behind the vehicles, returning fire. The team engaged, controlled bursts, picking targets systematically. Tessa scanned the chaos through her scope, looking for the team leader. There, a man in tactical black, older, moving with authority, shouting orders in Russian. I've got the primary target, she called, northwest corner behind the middle vehicle. Can you take the shot? Rhodes asked. Negative, too many bodies in the way. Then we go in. Rourke, Vale, cover us. Everyone else, on me. Rhodes and 3 operators advanced, using suppressing fire to close the distance. The militants fought back hard, but they were outgunned and outmaneuvered. One by one, they fell. The team leader saw the writing on the wall. He broke from cover, sprinting toward the rocky terrain, trying to escape. Tessa tracked him through her scope. He was fast, moving in unpredictable patterns, using the terrain for cover. He's running, someone shouted. I've got him, Tessa said. She led the target, accounted for his speed and direction, and fired. The round hit him in the leg. He went down hard, screaming, clutching his thigh. Rhodes's team was on him in seconds, zip-tying his hands, hauling him upright. The firefight was over. The convoy was neutralized. Total elapsed time, 4 minutes. 4. Tessa lowered her rifle and exhaled slowly. Target secured, Rhodes reported, moving to exfil point. They dragged the team leader to the extraction helicopter while medics worked on his leg. He was conscious, glaring at them with pure hatred, spitting Russian curses. Vaughn was waiting when they landed back at base. He watched as the prisoner was hauled off to interrogation, then turned to Tessa. Good work, he said. Now let's see what he knows. The interrogation took 6 hours. Tessa wasn't allowed in the room, but she waited outside, pacing, listening to muffled voices through the soundproofed walls. Finally, Vaughn emerged, looking satisfied. He talked, Vaughn said. Sokolov's location, security details, everything. We've got him. Tessa's pulse quickened. Where? Syria. Operating out of a compound near the Turkish border. He's planning to move in 48 hours, which means we have a very narrow window. Vaughn pulled out his phone, made a call. I'm assembling a strike team. You're on it. When do we leave? Tomorrow night. This is going to be the real thing, Vale. No practice runs, no second chances. Sokolov's fortress is heavily defended. If we're going to take him down, we need to be perfect. Tessa nodded. I'll be ready. Vaughn studied her. Your father failed to kill this man once. You ready to finish what he started? Tessa thought about her father, about all those years of training, all those warnings, all those secrets he'd carried to his grave. Yeah, she said. I'm ready. Vaughn walked away, already on his phone, coordinating the operation. Tessa stood alone in the hallway, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on her. Tomorrow night, she would face the man who'd been hunting her father's ghost for 15 years. And one of them wasn't walking away. Tessa spent that night in the armory, alone with her rifle and her thoughts. She disassembled the weapon completely, laying each piece on the workbench with the precision of a surgeon, bolt, firing pin, extractor, scope mount, every component clean and perfect. Then she reassembled it in the dark, fingers moving by muscle memory alone, just like her father had taught her. You need to know this weapon better than you know yourself, he'd told her when she was 12, hands still too small to properly shoulder the rifle. Because when everything goes wrong, when you're scared and bleeding and the world's falling apart, this is the only thing you can trust. She'd asked him once why he was teaching her to kill. He'd looked at her with those sad, tired eyes and said, I'm not teaching you to kill. I'm teaching you to survive. Now, sitting in the fluorescent-lit armory, she finally understood what he meant. The door opened. Carver walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee. He set one down beside her without a word and leaned against the workbench. Couldn't sleep either? He asked. Don't need sleep, need focus. Carver took a sip, studying her. You know you don't have to do this. Vaughn's operation, Sokolov, none of it is your fight. It became my fight the moment my father died and left me his ghosts. That's not fair to you. Life's not fair, Lieutenant. You taught me that. Tessa clicked the bolt assembly back into place. My father spent 15 years running. I'm tired of running. So you're going to fly into Syria, assault a fortified compound, and put a bullet in one of the most dangerous men alive. Carver shook his head. That's not ending the running, Vale. That's sprinting straight into the fire. Then I'll burn. Tessa looked at him directly. But at least I'll burn on my terms. Carver was quiet for a long moment. Then he set his coffee down and pulled something from his pocket, a small patch, worn and faded, showing a skull with wings. This was Hatch's, he said quietly. His call sign patch. He wanted you to have it. Told me right before His voice caught. Right before the end. Said you earned it. Tessa took the patch, felt the weight of it in her palm. It was just fabric and thread, but it carried the ghost of a man who'd believed in her when no one else did. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me. Just come back alive. Because if you die tomorrow, Hatch's sacrifice means nothing. I'm not going to die. You can't promise that. Watch me. Carver smiled despite himself. You're either the bravest person I've ever met or the most stubborn. Can it be both? Yeah, I guess it can. Carver pushed off the workbench. The team briefs at 0600. Get some rest, even if you don't think you need it. He left, closing the door quietly behind him. Tessa sat alone holding Hatch's patch, feeling the weight of everyone who'd believed in her pressing down like armor. She wasn't going to let them down. The briefing room at 0600 was packed with the most elite operators on the base. Tessa walked in to find 12 hardened soldiers. Delta, SEAL, Special Activities, sitting around the table, all eyes turning to her. These weren't the same men who'd mocked her 2 weeks ago. These were professionals who'd heard the stories, read the after-action reports, and knew exactly what she could do. Vaughn stood at the head of the table, a detailed 3D model of Sokolov's compound projected on the screen behind him. "This is the target," he said, voice crisp and cold. "Viktor Sokolov's fortress, 20 kilometers inside the Syrian border. 3-story structure, reinforced concrete, surrounded by a 10-foot wall with guard towers at each corner. Estimated 40 to 50 security personnel, all former Russian special forces. Sokolov himself stays on the 3rd floor, rarely leaves the building." Rhodes pointed at the model. "What about air defense?" 2 man-pads positions on the roof plus small arms. "The compound is too hot for a direct helicopter assault. We'll have to insert 5 clicks out and approach on foot." "In hostile territory," Rourke said, "with every militant group in the region probably watching. That's why we're going in at 0200 local time. Minimal moon, maximum darkness." Vaughn pulled up a tactical overlay. "Here's the plan. We insert via MH-47, fast rope at the LZ, then move in 2 teams. Team Alpha, Rhodes, Rourke, and 4 operators will breach the compound from the east and provide distraction. Team Bravo, Carver, Vale, and 2 specialists will infiltrate from the west and make your way to the 3rd floor." Tessa studied the approach route. "What's the exfil?" "Helicopter extraction from the compound courtyard once Sokolov is confirmed dead. You'll have 15 minutes from initial breach to elimination before enemy reinforcements arrive. After that, the window closes." 15 minutes, Carver repeated, "for a 3-story building with 50 hostiles." "That's why Vale's the primary shooter," Vaughn said. "She'll clear the path. The rest of you provide security and extract her when the job's done." One of the Delta operators, a massive man with a shaved head and scars on his neck, spoke up. "With all due respect, we're putting this entire op on an 18-year-old? That's a hell of a risk." "It's a calculated risk," Vaughn replied. "Specialist Vale has the highest confirmed kill count of anyone in this room. She's also the best sniper we've got for precision shots in close quarters. If anyone can make this work, it's her." The Delta operator looked at Tessa, skeptical but not hostile. "You really that good?" Tessa met his eyes. "Why don't you ask the 40-plus militants I dropped in the last 2 weeks?" A few operators smiled. The Delta guy nodded slowly. "Fair enough." Vaughn continued the briefing, covering contingencies, comm protocols, and rules of engagement. Tessa absorbed every detail, committing the compound layout to memory, visualizing the mission from insertion to exfil. When the briefing ended, Vaughn pulled her aside. "This is it," he said quietly. "This is what your father couldn't finish. You ready to carry that weight?" "I've been carrying it my whole life," Tessa replied. "At least now I get to put it down. Just remember, Sokolov survived 15 years of people trying to kill him. He's smart, paranoid, and extremely dangerous. Don't underestimate him." "I won't." "Good. Because if this goes sideways, there's no backup plan. We're deep in denied territory. If you get compromised, you're on your own." "Understood." Vaughn studied her one last time, then nodded. "Wheels up in 6 hours. Get your gear ready." Gee, the flight to the insertion point took 3 hours. The MH-47 Chinook flew low and fast, hugging the terrain, avoiding radar, slipping through the night like a ghost. Inside, the team sat in silence, each operator lost in their own pre-mission ritual, checking weapons, reviewing maps, or simply staring into the middle distance. Tessa sat near the rear ramp, rifle across her lap, Hatch's patch velcroed to her vest. She could feel the weight of the mission pressing down, but beneath it was something else. Clarity, purpose. The knowledge that everything in her life had been leading to this moment. Carver sat down beside her. "You good?" "Yeah." "You're lying." Tessa smiled slightly. "Maybe, but I'm still going to get the job done." "I know you will. Just..." Carver hesitated. "Just don't do anything stupid. You've already proved you belong. You don't need to be a hero." Not trying to be a hero, just trying to finish what my father started. Your father would want you to survive, not settle his old scores. My father would want me to make my own choices, Tessa replied, and I choose to end this. Tonight. The loadmaster's voice crackled over the intercom. 5 minutes to LZ. Prepare for insertion. The team stood, checked harnesses, grabbed ropes. The rear ramp lowered, revealing a dark landscape of rocks and scrub brush, illuminated only by starlight. The helicopter flared and hovered. Rhodes was first down the rope, then Rourke, then the others. Tessa went last, sliding down into hostile territory, boots hitting dirt, weapon up. The Chinook pulled away immediately, disappearing into the night, leaving them alone in enemy country. Rhodes keyed his radio, voice barely a whisper. All teams, comm check. One by one, the operators confirmed. Then they started moving. The approach took 40 minutes of careful movement through rocky terrain, avoiding roads, staying below ridge lines. Tessa moved like a shadow, rifle ready, scanning for threats. Every sound was amplified in the silence. Wind over rocks, distant dogs barking, the faraway rumble of a vehicle. They reached the final observation point overlooking the compound. Through night vision, Tessa could see the fortress clearly, exactly as the briefing had shown. Lights in some windows, guards patrolling the walls, and somewhere inside, Viktor Sokolov. Rhodes split the teams. Alpha, move to East Breach Point. Bravo, West Side. We go on my mark in 10 minutes. Questions? No one spoke. Then let's finish this. Alpha team peeled off, disappearing into the darkness. Tessa followed Carver and the two specialists toward the west wall, moving slowly, using every bit of cover. They reached the wall and stacked up. One specialist placed a small breaching charge on a service door. The other covered the approach with his weapon. Carver looked at Tessa. Ready? She nodded. Rhodes' voice crackled over the radio. All teams, stand by. Stand by. Execute. The breaching charge detonated, sharp and loud. Alpha Team's breach went off simultaneously on the far side of the compound. Gunfire erupted instantly. Tessa's team poured through the door, weapons up, clearing the ground floor with brutal efficiency. 2 guards materialized from a side room. The specialist dropped them before they could raise their weapons. Clear, one specialist whispered. They moved toward the stairwell. The sounds of Alpha Team's firefight echoed through the building. Sustained bursts, shouted commands, the occasional explosion. Carver took point up the stairs. Tessa followed, rifle covering the angles. 2nd floor. Empty. They kept moving. 3rd floor. The door at the top of the stairs was reinforced steel, locked from the inside. Breaching, the specialist whispered, placing another charge. The explosion blew the door off its hinges. Tessa was through first, rifle up, scanning. The 3rd floor was a maze of hallways and rooms, dimly lit by emergency lighting. At the far end, double doors led to what looked like a master suite. Sokolov's quarters. Gunfire erupted from a side room. One specialist went down, screaming, clutching his leg. Carver returned fire, dropped the shooter, dragged the wounded man to cover. Go, Carver shouted at Tessa. We'll hold here. Finish it. Tessa didn't hesitate. She sprinted down the hallway, moving fast, staying low. A guard stepped out from a doorway. She shot him without breaking stride. She reached the double doors and kicked them open. The room beyond was massive, a combination office and living quarters with maps on the walls, weapons displayed like art, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the compound. And sitting behind a heavy wooden desk, calm as if he'd been expecting her, was Viktor Sokolov. He was older than his photos suggested, maybe 60, with silver hair and the kind of face that had seen empires rise and fall. He wore an expensive suit despite the firefight raging below. In his hands, he held a crystal glass of vodka. So, he said in heavily accented English, Elias Reeves' daughter finally arrives. Tessa kept her rifle trained on his center mass. Stand up, hands where I can see them. Sokolov smiled and took a sip of vodka. You know, I thought you would be taller. Your father was a very tall man. I said stand up. Or what? You will shoot me? Of course you will. That is why you came. Sokolov set the glass down gently. But first, I think we should talk. There are things you do not know. Things your father never told you. I don't care what you have to say. You should, because your father was not the hero you think he was. Tessa's finger tightened on the trigger. My father was a soldier who spent his life running from you because of what happened in Belarus. Is that what you believe? Sokolov laughed, bitter, tired. Your father did not run because of what I did. He ran because of what he did. You're lying. Am I? Sokolov stood slowly, keeping his hands visible. The mission in Belarus? Your father was supposed to kill me, yes, but he hesitated. He saw my family, my wife, my daughter, in the warehouse with me, and he could not pull the trigger. Tessa's heart hammered against her ribs. That's not... So he let me live. But his commanding officer, a man named Vaughn, was watching through satellite feed. Vaughn gave the order to fire anyway. Your father refused. So Vaughn called in an airstrike. Sokolov's voice went quiet. My family died in that explosion. My wife, my 8-year-old daughter. And your father, he could not live with what his people had done. So he disappeared. Tessa felt the ground shifting beneath her. You're lying. I have no reason to lie. I am already a dead man. You will kill me tonight, and this vendetta will finally end. Sokolov moved toward the window, looking out at the firefight below. But I wanted you to know the truth. Your father was not running from me. He was running from Vaughn, from the people who used him and then threw him away when he showed mercy. Vaughn is the same man who sent you here tonight, who told you I was the monster, who used you as bait to draw me out, just like he used your father 15 years ago. Sokolov turned back to her. You think this is about justice? This is about cleaning up loose ends, and you, Tessa Vale, are just another tool. The room spun. Tessa's mind raced, trying to process, trying to separate truth from manipulation. Sokolov saw the doubt in her eyes. If you do not believe me, ask yourself why Vaughn never told you the full story, why he kept your father's real file classified, why he waited until you were the perfect weapon before telling you anything at all. Tessa's radio crackled, Vaughn's voice. Bravo, team. What's your status? Do you have the target? She stared at Sokolov, at this man who'd haunted her father's nightmares, this man who claimed to be a victim, not a villain. Answer him, Sokolov said quietly. Tell him you found me, and then decide who the real enemy is. Tessa's hand trembled. The rifle felt impossibly heavy. She keyed her radio. Target located, 3rd floor, main suite. Confirmed kill? Vaughn asked. Tessa looked at Sokolov. The old man stood there, waiting, no fear in his eyes, just resignation. And in that moment, Tessa made her choice. Negative, she said. Target is surrendering. I'm bringing him in alive. Silence on the radio, then Vaughn's voice sharp and cold. That's not the mission, specialist. Eliminate the target now. No. That's an order. And I'm refusing it. Tessa lowered her rifle slightly. If you want him dead, come do it yourself. The radio went dead. Sokolov smiled sadly. You are braver than your father, and more foolish. Maybe, but I'm done being anyone's weapon. Tessa gestured toward the door. Now move, we're getting out of here. They made it 3 steps before the window exploded. The shot came from somewhere outside, a high-powered rifle fired by someone on Overwatch. The round hit Sokolov in the chest, punching through him, slamming him against the wall. He slid down, leaving a smear of blood, eyes wide with shock. Tessa dove for cover, but there was nowhere to go. The shooter had the entire room covered. Sokolov coughed, blood bubbling on his lips. Told you. Loose ends. Stay with me, Tessa said, pressing her hands against the wound. But it was useless. The shot had torn through his heart. Sokolov looked at her with fading eyes. Your father, he was a good man. Then he was gone. Tessa knelt there, hands covered in blood, staring at the body. Vaughn's voice crackled over the radio, calm and professional. Target eliminated. All teams move to exfil point. Mission complete. Tessa grabbed her rifle and ran. She burst out of the suite, found Carver in the hallway, dragging the wounded specialist toward the stairs. We need to move, Carver shouted. Building's going to collapse. Alpha team planted charges. Vaughn killed him, Tessa said, voice shaking with rage. Sokolov was surrendering and Vaughn had him shot. Carver's face went pale. What? This whole thing was a setup. Vaughn just wanted Sokolov dead. He was never going to let him talk. An explosion rocked the building. Somewhere below, Alpha team was blowing their way out. We'll deal with Vaughn later, Carver said. Right now, we survive. Move. They raced down the stairs as the building began to crumble. Chunks of ceiling crashed down. Flames licked through the walls. By the time they reached the ground floor, the entire structure was groaning like a dying beast. They burst into the courtyard just as the extraction helicopter touched down. Rhodes was already aboard, waving them forward. Go, go, go! Tessa and Carver hauled the wounded specialist into the helicopter. It lifted off immediately, pulling up and away as the building collapsed behind them, sending a pillar of fire and smoke into the night sky. Tessa sat in the cargo bay, covered in dust and blood, staring at her hands. Carver put a hand on her shoulder. You did good, Vale. She shook her head. I killed him. I pulled the trigger. No, Vaughn did. Same difference. It's not. And you know it. Carver's grip tightened. You tried to do the right thing. That matters. Tessa wasn't sure if she believed him, but she was too tired to argue. The helicopter flew through the darkness, carrying them back toward friendly territory, leaving behind the ruins of Viktor Sokolov's fortress and the ghosts of her father's war. The debriefing happened 24 hours later in a different secure facility far from the forward base. Tessa sat across from Vaughn in a sterile conference room, Carver beside her, both exhausted and angry. Vaughn looked annoyingly fresh, like he'd slept well. Mission accomplished. Sokolov's dead. The threat's neutralized. You had him executed, Tessa said flatly. I completed the mission objective. He was surrendering. He was a terrorist and an arms dealer responsible for thousands of deaths. His surrender was irrelevant. Vaughn leaned forward. You did your job, specialist. You got us close enough to take the shot. That's all that mattered. All that mattered? Tessa's voice rose. You lied to me. You used me. You killed a man who might have had information. What information? The ramblings of a dying criminal trying to save his own life? Vaughn's eyes were cold. Sokolov would have said anything to survive. That's what people like him do. And what about my father? Was Sokolov telling the truth about Belarus? Vaughn was quiet for a moment. Then he shrugged. Does it matter? Your father's dead. Sokolov's dead. The past is buried. Carver slammed his fist on the table. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting, Lieutenant. Vaughn stood. This conversation is over. Specialist Vale completed her mission with distinction. I'll be recommending her for commendation. As for the rest, there's nothing more to discuss. He walked toward the door. I quit, Tessa said. Vaughn stopped, turned. Excuse me? I quit. I'm done being your weapon. Find someone else. Vaughn smiled thinly. You can't quit, Specialist. You signed a contract. You belong to the military for 3 more years. Then I'll request a transfer, away from Special Operations, away from you. Request denied. You can't. I can, and I will. Vaughn's voice went hard. You're too valuable, Vale. Too skilled, too useful. You think I'm going to let you walk away after everything you've proven you can do? Tessa stood, fists clenched. You don't own me. Actually, I do, for 3 more years. Vaughn headed for the door. Get some rest, Specialist. You've earned it. We'll have another mission for you soon. He left. Tessa stood there, shaking with rage and helplessness. Carver put a hand on her arm. We'll figure this out. I promise. How? He's right. I'm locked in. There are ways, regulations, people we can talk to. Carver's jaw was tight. Vaughn doesn't get to do this. Not to you. It took 6 weeks, but Carver kept his promise. He pulled strings, filed reports, talked to people in positions Tessa didn't even know existed. And slowly, the walls around her started to crack. The official story was that Specialist Tessa Vale was being reassigned to training duty, helping to develop the next generation of military snipers. It was technically a demotion, but it got her away from Vaughn and his black operations. The unofficial story was that several senior officers had started asking uncomfortable questions about Vaughn's methods, his use of assets, and the Belarus mission from 15 years ago. An investigation was quietly opened. Vaughn disappeared from the sector 2 weeks later. Some said he was reassigned. Others said he was forced into early retirement. Tessa didn't care which. She just knew he was gone. The base held a small ceremony before Tessa transferred out. The same operators who'd mocked her 2 months ago now stood in formation, saluting as she walked past. Rourke shook her hand, respect in his eyes. Rhodes gave her Hatch's rifle scope, cleaned, calibrated, perfect. He'd want you to have it, Rhodes said quietly. Tessa accepted it, throat tight. Carver walked her to the transport helicopter. You sure about this? Training duty's going to be boring after everything you've done. Good, Tessa said. I could use boring for a while. You saved a lot of lives out here, Vale. You know that, right? I know, but I also learned something. What's that? Being the best shot in the room doesn't make you a hero. It just makes you dangerous. Tessa looked at him. My father was dangerous, and it got him killed. I'd rather be something else. Like what? Like someone who teaches others to survive instead of sending them to die. She smiled slightly. Think there's a future in that? Carver smiled back. Yeah, I think there is. The helicopter spun up. Tessa climbed aboard, settling into the cargo bay one last time. As they lifted off, she looked down at the base, at the compound where she'd arrived as a nobody and left as a legend, at the desert that had tested her and nearly broken her, at the place where she'd learned that being underestimated was the best armor and the worst curse all at once. The helicopter banked west, toward home, toward whatever came next. And Tessa sat back, rifle across her lap, Hatch's scope in her pack, and her father's photograph tucked against her heart. She'd finished his war. Now it was time to write her own story. 3 months later, at a training facility in Virginia, 18 recruits stood in formation while their new instructor introduced herself. My name is Specialist Tessa Vale, she said, voice calm and confident, and I'm going to teach you how to be the best sniper you can possibly be. Not because I want you to have the highest kill count, but because I want you to come home alive. The recruits stared at her, some skeptical, some curious, all young and untested, just like she'd been. First lesson, Tessa continued, never underestimate the quiet one. Never dismiss someone because they look weak or young or different. Because sometimes the person everyone underestimates is the one who saves everyone else in the end. She paused, meeting each recruit's eyes. And if you remember nothing else from your time here, remember this. Your job isn't to be a weapon. Your job is to be a guardian. There's a difference, and that difference will define who you become. The recruits nodded, absorbing the words. Tessa smiled slightly, picked up her rifle, and led them toward the range. Behind her, the sun was rising over the mountains, gold and brilliant and full of promise. And for the first time in her life, Tessa Vale walked toward it without looking over her shoulder. The world will try to tell you what you are based on how you look, how old you are, or where you come from. Don't let them. Your strength isn't defined by their expectations. It's defined by your courage to prove them wrong and your wisdom to know when the fight is worth it.